Good morning, YouTube people. I promised to make this video for an owner in Texas who's getting ready to do a carb conversion, and so I'm going to go ahead and share it with you all as well. When he goes to start his engine for the first time, this is what his carburetor is going to be like inside. It'll be totally bone dry. Won't be a drop of fuel in it. And to move fuel from the front of the car to the back of the car, especially with a mechanical fuel pump, he'll be cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking for a very, very long time, potentially long enough to overheat the starter motor. So really, he needs to fill the carburetor manually the very first time he starts the car. And this can also happen, like if you don't drive your car for about a month. It takes about a month for the fuel to all evaporate out. Your carburetor will be bone dry inside. Mine, I haven't driven this car in about a week, and it was basically full. I had to sop all that out with a rag. That's how I got it dry. But I wanted it to emulate what he's going to find when he puts the carburetor on his car for the first time. So, let me put the top back on the carburetor. I'm going to try this with one hand. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Either I'll be able to assemble it with one hand or I won't. Only one way to find out. If it doesn't work, I'll just stop this video and start it again after I've put the top back on the carburetor. Working thus far. Choke linkage tab, that's going to be the hard one. Every carb owner out there needs to be proficient at taking the top off their carburetor. There's sometimes you just have to physically look and see what's going on inside the carburetor. You know, is my fuel pump putting out? Well, take the top off the carburetor and look. If there's fuel in the carburetor, then yes, your fuel pump is putting out. If the carburetor is dry inside, could be the fuel pump, could be the tank. On Farrah's car, I was test driving it and ran the tank dry. Could be something between the tank, the fuel pump, and the carburetor. Could be your fuel filter's clogged up. But if you want to know if there's fuel inside the carburetor, the best way to do it is to take the top off the carburetor and look. If I were smart, I'd stop this thing and restart it. I'm working blind here. I am kind of curious if I can put the top on the carburetor with one hand. That's why I'm doing this. And I've almost finished. I don't know if I'll be able to do it or not. And by the way, those bolts that hold the top on the carburetor, they don't have to be otherworldly tight. Just snug them down, that's fine. Well, look at this. We have just about, this is the little screw I'm going to end up dropping. I don't believe it. One-handed carburetor assembly. Never done that before. Alright, as I was saying, this is the situation he's going to find himself in when he puts the conversion on his car for the first time. His carburetor is going to be bone dry. It needs to be filled manually. And there's a couple ways you can do that. Number one, you can just pour the fuel in while the top's off the carburetor if you take the top off. What I usually use, I have a little funnel here that fits in the chimneys perfectly. And I usually use that little funnel to fill a carburetor, like every time I'm test driving one for somebody or something like that. You can also make a poor man's funnel out of a magazine cover. You need to use the cover because it's a little bit thicker than the pages, and being glossy, it won't get saturated with fuel or anything like that. And you just roll it up and make a cone, make a poor man's funnel. That would also work. And how much fuel should you put in? This is a perfect amount. One rattle can's worth. Perfect amount of fuel. So what you do, get your funnel, get your rattle can cap of fuel, just pour that into the carburetor. The carb now has fuel in it. Will it start? Only one way to find out. Yes, it will start. So, when he very first puts his conversion on the car, he will need to fill the carburetor manually. And once he does that, you know, life is good. Another thing you can do, for those of you running electric fuel pumps, which have a bad habit of just dying randomly, that's why I use a mechanical pump now, you can limp the car a surprising distance, filling the bowl manually, driving it till it runs dry, filling it manually, driving till it runs dry. If you keep your RPMs down, you can get about a mile, maybe just a hair less than a mile before the bowl runs dry. So if you're ever in a situation where your fuel pump is not putting out and you need to limp the car to a safe haven, even if you don't have a funnel in the car, like I showed you, you can make a poor man's funnel, just using, you know, anything to get the fuel into the chimney on the carb there. And I've actually limped a car 10 miles that way. It wasn't this car, it was a Lincoln. But I actually managed to limp a Lincoln 10 miles back to the house, filling the bowl, driving it till it ran dry, refilling the bowl, driving till it ran dry, and, you know, it took me about 10 refills. But it did save me a tow. Got the car back to the house. And so you need to be proficient at taking the top off of your carburetor and looking inside, so that way if you ever have a question about fuel delivery, you can answer it instantaneously. You know, either there's fuel in the bowl or there isn't fuel in the bowl. And then, like, if you haven't driven the car in about a month, you're either going to sit there and go crank, 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 you know, to move fuel from the back of the car, or from front of the car to the back of the car, or you can just fill the bowl manually and fire it right up. If you're doing a carb conversion for the very first time you go to start it, you know, the fuel system is totally empty, so just fill the bowl manually, and that's that.